The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. We're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is firefighting. What? Firefighting is near and dear to your heart? Yes, so let me give you a little bit of history, I'll give you some baseline terminology, and then I will explain to everyone what happens when you call 911 for a fire. Many years ago, decades ago, I joined a joint police, fire, and EMS department. And at the time, I had a background in criminal justice, alphabet soup after my name, with law enforcement. The only thing I knew about firefighting, which still holds true today, is that you are supposed to run out of the burning building, not into the burning building. Obviously, I say that in jest, but let me tell you about the different types of calls that fire departments respond to. And this is at least true for the North Shore of Chicagoland. I cannot speak for other fire departments in other areas of the country or even the state. There's 4 initial calls, code 1, 2, 3, and 4. A code 1 is an ambulance or an EMS call. You're getting 1 ambulance, 1 squad, and I'll explain what a squad is. It's not a squad car, and a police response to help the patient. A code 2 is more of a miscellaneous emergency. You're going to get a squad, an ambulance, and police, so it's a very similar response. And these are things like the carbon monoxide detectors. It's beeping, it's showing that there's carbon monoxide in the house. It's an odd odor investigation. It could even be a car on fire. That's a code 2. A code 3 is a fire alarm response. A lot of fire alarm systems are automated, and the local fire department, the dispatch center, gets an alert, and they will send to investigate to see if there's a fire. 2 engines, 1 truck, 1 ambulance, and police, about 10 people. A lot of times these are also known as AFAs. The correct term is automatic fire alarms. The joking term is automatic false alarms, because the vast majority of these are false. Doesn't mean they shouldn't respond, because 1 in 100, I don't know if that's a real statistic, but 1 in maybe 100 are fires. And so since fire departments are about life safety, not about property protection, they're about saving lives, they send more people than they need. This is going to be the crux of the conversation. Code 4 is a confirmed structure fire. 3 engines, 2 trucks, 1 squad, 1 command vehicle, 1 ambulance, paid on-call firefighters, and police were dispatched. This is more than 21 people. And we'll do a breakdown of who does what on the fire scenes. The general public looks at a fire response vehicle and they say, ooh, a fire truck. Just like a non-gun owner will see a 45 ACP 1911 and say, ooh, a gun. I'm going to break down some of the definitions for everyone so that they understand, first of all, an engine. You've heard of fire truck, fire engine. An engine is a large multi-ton fire response vehicle that has the capability of pumping water. A squad is a rescue vehicle for a vehicle extrication, for a stuck elevator. They're going to be sending a squad, which has a ton of extrication tools. It has the jaws of life, as everyone refers to. And then there is something called a pumper squad. And that's the same thing as a squad and an engine. It has all of the rescue tools, and it has the capacity or the capability to pump water. A truck is simply a truck with a large aerial ladder. A quint is the same thing. It's a large vehicle with a ladder and also has the capability to pump water. Then there's a company officer. If you hear me refer to a company officer, that is the person in charge of the fire vehicle. Typically it's a lieutenant, sometimes it's a captain. Engineer is not just the driver of the vehicle, but they are the water pump controllers. And, big deal, they switch a lever. There's a little bit more to it. There's a lot of math involved because water velocity loses power the further it is away from the pump because of friction. And we all think of water as having no friction, but it actually does have friction, especially when it goes in large quantities. And then there's the ambulance. We all know what an ambulance is. It's a mobile medical vehicle that can also transport an individual to the hospital. In this continued conversation, we are going to be referencing the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA. So the NFPA has guidelines that recommend that at least 16 firefighters are needed to mitigate a fire in a regular house. A lot of fire departments exceed that number due to coordinated automatic and mutual aid agreements between MABUS communities. I will explain what MABUS is in a moment. If more firefighters are needed, and I'll explain what that means, it can be upgraded next as a full still alarm. It goes on and on from there. Let's just say that there is a fire in Winnetka. Winnetka will get a fire engine from Glencoe, an ambulance from Highland Park, a truck from Winnetka, an engine from Winnetka, a truck from Wilmette, an engine from Northbrook. And that's what mutual aid is all about. It's about shared resources. One department, the one that I worked for, had what they called a jump company, which means they had 3 to 4 firefighters on duty at any one time, plus police. Now remember, all the police were also firefighters, but they were in squad cars. And this jump company, if there's an EMS call, they take the squad and the ambulance. If there's an AFA or an automatic fire alarm, they take the engine. And it all depends on what the type of call is to the vehicle and equipment that they're taking. Some factors regarding the decision to upgrade to get additional people are percent involvement of the fire, rescue operations, number of victims, number of casualties, length of the incident, exposure problems. That means that another structure is too close to this one, and because of the heat transfer, that second structure could possibly catch on fire. Presence of hazardous materials and or presence of water or an in-house suppression system, which actually would reduce the additional response. In talking about rescue operations, there is a concept where you rotate firefighters in and out of doing the physical work of firefighting. And what that means is if a firefighter went through 2 self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA, air tanks, they need to have their temperature taken by EMS and sit out or cool down. When we get overheated or hot, our brains get overheated or hot, it results in poor decision making. There was a fire in Phoenix where a firefighter was disoriented, overheated, and ended up dying inside. And the rescue firefighters described it as trying to lift him off the ground to remove him, but it was as if he was nailed to the floor. He was totally unconscious with an extra several dozen pounds of firefighting equipment and clothing and whatnot. They were not able to save him, so something was implemented called a rapid intervention team, and later it was changed to a rapid intervention crew. And that's where, if you're ever at a structure fire or you see one on the news and you see a couple of firefighters kneeling on the front lawn, not doing anything, they are waiting for someone who's on the inside doing interior firefighting to call a mayday. Upon call of that mayday, the rapid intervention crew, their only job is to go in and save the downed firefighter. SCBAs have an alarm on them. It's called a pass alarm. And basically, if there's not any movement in a certain amount of time, 20 or 30 seconds, an alarm starts beeping. So I've been on calls inside of a house, and we're talking with the homeowner. There's not really a fire, but lightning has struck the house. Firefighter I'm with, he starts beeping, and he does a little wiggle so that the device knows that he's actually moving, and he's still working, and he's still alive, and he's not still and not downed. After another couple seconds, the alarm gets louder and louder and louder, and that's how a rapid intervention crew would find a downed firefighter. They're listening for the sound. It's a shrieking, high-pitched, very annoying sound, but it allows the rapid intervention crew to hear above the roar of a fire, and fires are loud. People don't realize how loud a fire is in a house. So it allows the rapid intervention crew to find and rescue the downed firefighter. Next, we're going to talk about fire flow. Fire flow does not mean the flow of a fire. It means the flow of water that is put on the fire. So there is a coordination between the fire department and public works so that they can make sure sometimes water mains break when there's firefighting activities going on. Sometimes public works departments have to actually increase the water pressure so that the engines and the pumpers can have enough water to put out the fire. For interior firefighting, the NFPA recommends at least 250 gallons a minute of fire flow. From an 1 3/4 hose, you can get about 200 gallons a minute, and it requires 2 firefighters to operate. 2 firefighters to operate a hose. Yes, it is a lot more powerful than a typical garden hose, and if left unattended, it will fly all around, snake all around in the air. I've seen it happen once where the person lost control of the hose, and it was quite dangerous. Everyone ran away until the engineer could shut off the water. Next, there's something called a 2.5. That means a 2.5-inch diameter hose, and that can flow 300 gallons of water a minute and requires 2 to 3 people to operate just to hold it steady. Then there's something called a master stream, and a master stream is something that is mounted on top of the fire trucks. It's a mounted nozzle that is 500 gallons a minute, and it is for a defensive operation. An offensive operation doesn't mean people get insulted. It means the firefighters go into the home to actually rescue people. A defensive operation is everyone's out. It's too dangerous for the firefighter to go in and save property, so they attack it from the outside. It's called a defensive posture. In 1 and 2 family dwellings, less than 3,600 square feet, the minimum fire flow is 1,000 gallons per minute. And that can be reduced if there is a sprinkler system inside. Why am I talking about gallons per minute and fire flow? The second segment talks about restoration of the home and some of the damage that's caused. And we'll talk about this more in depth in a little while. But where do you think all that water goes? 1,000 gallons a minute goes in the person's basement. And it can create mold issues, it can create flooding issues, etc. So that's why this first half of the episode is talking about firefighting, so that you have a baseline understanding of what these restoration people do. There are tasks, critical tasks for an initial response. It requires 3 firefighters to lay initial lines. What that means is pull hoses, bleed the hose line because there's air in it, and you don't want to shoot air onto a fire because you could be adding oxygen and making it hotter. So 3 firefighters are going to lay initial lines. 4 firefighters are going to have backup attack lines and do the water supply. So most modern fire vehicles hold 500 to 1,000 gallons of water, which can be immediately deployed. It's not clean water, so don't ever take a drink from that. The water kind of gets a little rusty inside the tank, and it can be used to initially attack a fire. That second engine hooks up to the water supply. They will take a large hose, usually a 4 to 5 inch in diameter, and run it from an intake into the engine to the fire hydrant. 4 to 5 inches of water in diameter gets sucked into the engine, and then the engine pump distributes it among the smaller hand lines, the 1 3/4, the 2.5. Then there are backup, attack, and exposure lines. The third engine would do that, requires 4 people. You need 1 pump operator, that's the engineer who's going to operate the pump. And then you need a ventilation crew to secure utilities and raise ladders. The first squad in on the scene does a search and rescue. The second truck on scene will do a secondary search, so they will help the first crew do the search. You need 1 person in the command vehicle, 2 people for rehab. That's the ambulance, and that's where they take the temperature of the firefighters who've cycled in and out, have them sit down. Sometimes in larger events, there's something called the canteen or the mess, and that's looks like a bread truck comes and they give nourishment, Gatorade, water. When I was on a scene, I used to get pound cake. They would replenish the energy level of the firefighters, and then you had an RIC, Rescue Intervention Crew, which is 2 people. That totals 21 people. which exceeds the 16-person NFPA recommendation. At this point, if the company officer or the incident commander says, oh, wow, we need more people, then they raise a full still alarm where they get an additional engine with 4 people, sector command and safety officer, 2 people, tertiary attack lines and exposure lines, that's if another structure is too close to the one that's involved, and that's another engine, and then rehab or transport sector is another engine. So one ambulance is reserved for firefighters in case they need to go to the hospital. There are additional ambulances that would take victims to the hospital. And if that's not enough people, then they call a box alarm. You're going to get additional engines, you're going to get additional sector commands, and these sector commands could be for a multi-story apartment building. So you might have an incident commander on the outside, you might have a sector commander on the first floor staging the fires on the second floor, so you have another incident commander on the second floor, etc., etc. All of these firefighters are needed to mitigate a fire. But wait, there's more. The engine company officer, first vehicle on the scene, is responsible for rescue, leading out a hose line to a fire, putting master streams into service if warranted, locate and perform hydrant hookups, begin standpipe operations, meaning that there are sprinkler heads throughout the building and the engine actually supplies the water to that sprinkler. The initial responding company will also assess and assist with forcible entry. There's something in firefighting called try before you pry. Instead of knocking a door down, see if it's unlocked first. And if it is, you don't have to damage it. There's also a passport accountability system. You got these little tags on the inside of the helmet. And if Marcus is going to go into a fire, he gives a tag to the incident commander who knows Melnick, Smith, Jones are inside the building, and they can be accounted for in case they go down. They will also vent. Venting is very important, and the best analogy I can do that typically everybody has experience with is opening a bag of microwave popcorn. When you open a bag of popcorn, you'll see all this steam go out, and that cools down the popcorn to make it safe to touch instead of super hot and safe to eat. Same thing. Firefighters will go to the second level. Their first goal is to open any windows. If that doesn't work, they will break windows. And then the ladder crew or the truck company will go onto the roof if it's a huge fire, and they will cut a hole in the roof. And all that's doing is making it so the heat and smoke can escape. As a firefighter sprays water onto the fire, it actually pushes the fire backwards. It also pushes the fire up. As they are spraying water on the fire goes further and further and further into the unit until it gets to a rear wall, and then it gets extinguished. Roof ventilation is a thing, and it will destroy your roof. That's one of the reasons why you have a restoration company come in to repair and or replace any damage that is caused by firefighters. The old joke is that if you're on a squad company, you like to break stuff because they're the ones making forcible entry. They're the ones doing salvage and overhaul, which we will talk about next. So the squad company does forcible entry and removes obstacles so the firefighters don't get hung up in them. Immediate forcible entry is initiated in the following situations. If you have smoke or fire showing, there are life hazards, which means people are in danger. There's a fire extension, which means it's spread, or as circumstances dictate. So it gives the incident commander some leeway, some discretion on when it is important to use it. Size up determines the forcible entry method. A firefighter can use an axe, a Halligan, a pry bar. It could be through the lock. It could be a saw or other power tool, and it really depends on the makeup of the door. Is it steel? Is it wood? Is it residential? Is it commercial? And there's tons of different tools that a squad will carry so that firefighters can gain entry to just about everything. Firefighters are supposed to keep damage to a minimum. However, that doesn't always happen. When alternate means can be utilized, which is more efficient and less damaging to get into a home, particularly for like a carbon monoxide investigation, not necessarily a fire, contacting a key holder is probably the least destructive. Now we're going to talk about salvage and overhaul. These are the most dangerous parts to the incident to the firefighter. Because if you've read my book, The Opposite of Safe, immediately after an incident, everybody lets their guard down. They're relaxed. Napoleon has said the greatest danger to soldiers is immediately after the battle because they're exhausted, their guard is down. So salvage consists of reducing fire, water, and smoke damage. A lot of the damages are caused by water, ventilating the building, and checking for fire extension, and I'll explain that in a minute. And these damages can't be eliminated, but good procedures help minimize losses. Salvage means putting everything away. It means making sure that the hoses don't have water in them because they're very difficult to load when they are full. Anyone who's picked up a full fire hose says to themselves, oh my goodness, I can't believe how heavy it is. So there's techniques to drain the water hoses. They'll get them back on the trucks. Later they go into a tower where they hang vertically. Usually, I think it's 50 or 60 feet high because they're 50 or 60 feet in length, and they air dry. So some property may appear to have little value, but may have great sentimental value to the people. It could be a piece of furniture. It could be an heirloom, a bunch of stuff that could be now destroyed. So firefighters are asked to take care when they are moving around furniture, etc. And overhaul, so he's talked about salvage and overhaul. Overhaul means opening up the walls, ceilings, and partitions to identify and expose hidden fires. Back in the day, they used to take a halligan, which is kind of like a pry bar or an axe, and they used to chop up the walls. Because fire tends to travel in between studs to different areas of the home. It travels behind drop ceilings. The firefighters rip open the wall to see if there's any burning embers in between the walls. Technology has advanced, and now there's a thermal imaging camera, so they can actually take the camera, look at the walls, and look for hot spots. I don't mean electrical hot, although they're going to secure utilities anyway and turn off all the electricity. So there's not going to be any electrical hotspot. But if you are in a home that still has power to it, and you take that thermal imaging camera and you put it, it'll show you all of the electrical outlets, junctions, that type of thing behind the wall because there is a heat element to them. They're going to rip up your house. Plus, you're going to have flooded basement. It's going to be horrible, and everything's going to smell like smoke. And I don't mean the good pipe smoke, cigar smoke that Grandpa used to have. It's going to reek. It's not going to be nice. Overhaul will also remove furniture that is smoldering, beds, couches, and they'll throw them on the front lawn. And that way, if they reignite, at least they're outside and the home is saved. If the furniture isn't moved, debris can accumulate on top of it and making moving more difficult. Overhaul operations is slow. Safety is the prime consideration. The fire is over. We don't want any firefighters to move stuff, hurt their back. Safety can be improved by ventilation. There are also ejector fans. These are a little bit different than your tabletop fans that you buy at Target. It's a powerful fan that will suck out air and create airflow in the structure to make it less smoky. And these are used during salvage and overhaul. When I lived in an apartment building, I had my kids were little, and I would come home every day, and there was some jerk in the building that would smoke pot in the hallway and or in the laundry room. They'd carve out an apple, and that would be their device. I don't really know the terminology. And our whole first floor would reek like cannabis. So one time it was pretty bad, and I didn't want my kids to be exposed to it. I called the fire department. I said, look, it's not an emergency. It's the smell of pot. It's very, very distinct, and it's disgusting. And I'm going to ask if the fire department can come with an ejector fan and just blow that stuff out. So they did. Very, very nice. Talked to the cop that went also. Super nice people. They propped open the two doors on opposite sides of the building. They stuck an ejector fan there, and they sucked out all of the disgusting smell. I knew who it was, but we couldn't catch them. And this was before cannabis was legal. And it was kind of rude. You don't do that. You don't go into inside a laundry room of a multi-tenant building and just smoke weed. These neighbors were not cool. Lighting is also a consideration. Remember, they're going to secure utilities. That means turn off the water, turn off the gas. So there might need to be portable lighting to be brought in. And firefighters always have at least one flashlight with them. Some of them have flashlights mounted on their helmets so that they can see. Hazardous areas could also be present. You could have a hole in the floor. Fire can burn a hole in the floor. The floor could be real spongy. Stay off of that type of thing. Or firefighters should stay off of that thing. The biggest danger is exhaustion. When we are exhausted, we don't make very good decisions, and that's why we rehab firefighters. We send them in and out. Anytime they're inside the building, they need to be wearing SCBA. The construction of modern facilities uses lightweight construction methods, so instead of nails, they use glue. When glue catches on fire or melts and gets airborne, it is carcinogenous, meaning there's a lot of firefighters who get cancer because of their exposure to all of these chemicals. There you have it, folks. How do I know all this stuff? I learned from the department that I worked at. I wrote a suite of firefighting policies. When I started, there was only a few policies for firefighting, and they were what we just discussed, how to fight a fire in a residential structure. The other guidelines that were in place were how to check the ambulance for the appropriate amount of medications, drugs, equipment, etc. in the morning. There was a dive rescue because we were on Lake Michigan, and there was a hazardous materials guideline as well. We didn't have anything on paramedic licensure, elevator operations, mass casualty, school bus accidents, vehicle extrication, and a bunch of other types of incidents that we responded to. I authored all of those, and at one time I actually had a CFOD, which is Chief Fire Officer designation. So you're getting the expertise from someone who was in the industry for about 10 years. I absolutely loved it. It was a great, great culture. Firefighters are always there to help you. If you ever have questions, I can be reached at firearmmentorcard.com. And if you're interested in any concealed carry classes, the website is firearmmentor.com/classes. With that said, stay tuned for Restoration 1 Waukegan, where we will be discussing the repair and replacement of a damaged structure with Mindy Newman and Leo Prosiment. Stay tuned. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.